In 2014, a company sold a brick for $30. Not a metaphor. An actual clay brick with a red logo stamped on the side, no other function whatsoever. People lined up around the block to buy it. Within hours, that same brick was reselling online for over $1,000. The company that sold it started as a single skate shop on a narrow street in downtown Manhattan with barely enough space to fit 10 customers at once. 30 years later, that same company sold for $1.5 billion. This is the story of how a skate shop convinced the world to pay more for a box logo than most people pay for a used car. Supreme opened its doors in 1994 on Lafayette Street in New York City, founded by a British entrepreneur named James Jebbia. The store wasn't designed like a typical retail space. There were no long racks of clothes, no mirrors everywhere, barely any merchandise on display at all. Skaters actually wanted room to stand around, hang out, and skateboard indoors. So Jebbia built the store around that culture instead of around selling as much stuff as possible. That single decision, prioritizing culture over inventory, ended up being the most important business strategy the company ever made, even though nobody realized it at the time. Here's where it gets strange, because most retail businesses live and die by one rule: keep the shelves stocked, keep customers happy, never run out of what people want. Supreme did the exact opposite, on purpose. The company started releasing tiny batches of products every single Thursday, a practice fans now simply call drop day. A single t-shirt might come in a run of only a few hundred units worldwide, sell out in minutes, and that's it. No restock, no apology email, no back in stock soon. Gone forever. That scarcity wasn't a supply chain problem. It was the entire business model. When people believe something is about to disappear forever, they don't think twice. They just buy it immediately, then figure out whether they actually wanted it later. Behavioral economists have a name for this: loss aversion. And Supreme built an entire billion-dollar company almost entirely on top of it, decades before most brands understood the psychology behind their own customers. Now let's talk startup costs, because this part surprises almost everyone. Opening that first store reportedly cost somewhere in the range of only a few $100,000, mostly rent, basic fixtures, and initial inventory. Compare that to a modern flagship fashion store, which can easily run into the tens of millions once you count architecture, design, and marketing. Supreme didn't need any of that. The product was never really the t-shirt. The product was belonging to a subculture nobody else could get invited into. And Jebbia leaned into exclusivity in a way that should have killed the company, but instead made it stronger. He deliberately turned away potential customers. Store staff, according to widely reported accounts over the years, were known for being unfriendly to tourists who wandered in just to gawk, not to genuinely engage with skate culture. Most businesses beg for foot traffic. Supreme treated its own customers like they had to earn the right to shop there, and somehow that rudeness became part of the appeal. If a business is exclusive to the point of rudeness, it feels valuable. That's not a joke. It's genuinely part of the marketing strategy, whether Jebbia ever admitted it publicly or not. The real financial engine, though, wasn't in the store at all. It was in collaborations. Supreme began partnering with brands and artists that, on paper, had absolutely nothing to do with skateboarding. Louis Vuitton, The North Face, Nike, even Oreo cookies. Each collaboration sold out almost instantly, and because Supreme never overproduced, the secondary resale market exploded around it. A single hoodie retailing for maybe $160 could resell for 6 or 7 times that price within days. By 2017, the numbers had become impossible to ignore. The private equity firm Carlyle Group purchased a 50% stake in Supreme, valuing the entire company at approximately $1 billion for a business that still operated out of barely a dozen physical stores worldwide. Then, in 2020, VF Corporation, the same corporate parent behind the North Face, Vans, and Timberland, bought Supreme outright for $2.1 billion. A skate shop that once sold decks out of a cramped storefront was now sitting inside the same portfolio as some of the largest outdoor and lifestyle brands on the planet. But bigger corporate ownership doesn't automatically mean bigger success, and this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Under VF Corp, Supreme generated around $538 million in revenue during its 2024 fiscal year. Respectable, sure, but growth had clearly slowed compared to expectations set at the time of acquisition. Wall Street analysts openly said VF had overpaid, and in July of 2024, VF Corp sold Supreme again, this time to EssilorLuxottica, the eyewear giant behind Ray-Ban and Oakley, for just $1.5 billion. That's a loss of roughly $600 million in only 4 years. Somehow, a company built entirely on scarcity had become, for its corporate parent at least, an example of what happens when you try to scale scarcity too aggressively. Because here's the paradox sitting at the center of this entire story. Scarcity works precisely because it's rare. The moment a company tries to systematize scarcity across dozens of new international markets, opening new stores in China, expanding aggressively into South Korea, chasing bigger revenue targets quarter after quarter, the magic starts to leak out. Supreme's core customers built their entire identity around owning something almost nobody else could get. Turn that into a mass market growth strategy, and you're not selling exclusivity anymore. You're just selling merchandise with a red box logo on it. And merchandise, unlike belonging, can absolutely lose its shine. None of this erases what Jebbia actually built, though. He took a business model that traditional retail experts would have called insane, deliberately understocking product, ignoring customer demand on purpose, occasionally being outright unfriendly to shoppers, and turned it into one of the most recognizable streetwear brands in modern history. He proved that in certain markets, telling customers no is a far stronger sales pitch than telling them yes. So the next time you see people lining up outside a store hours before it opens just to buy a t-shirt or a skateboard deck or, apparently, a literal brick, remember that it was never really about the product sitting on the shelf. It was about the 200 people standing in that line with you, each one desperate to prove they belonged to something the rest of the world couldn't buy their way into. Supreme didn't sell clothing. It sold the feeling of being let in. And it turns out, that feeling was worth $1.5 billion.